Hey all, here are OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on review of the Strauss Wagner TW401. These are TWS wireless buds that sells for under $60. So it's a decent price that's fairly competitive with many of the other options that we've seen, and has a pretty elegant design that has this ring on the outside. Looks a little bit like an IEM or in-ear monitor, but not quite. It has a Realtek chip on this model, so it isn't quite Qualcomm aptX supported, which means it's not going to give you the absolute lowest latency. However, it should still be good enough for audio listening and for things like YouTube, for instance. Other specifications include a battery case that can provide up to 3 additional charges, even though the combined total is a little on the short side. The buds themselves, as you can see here, is only rated to last around 4 hours on a single charge at 80% volume. Now inside we have a quick user manual. We also get some spare silicone tips for a more comfortable fit, and a very standard these days USB Type-C cable, which is reversible to charge up the battery case. Speaking of, if we take a closer look at the battery case's design, pretty clean, but not anything too revolutionary. It is coated in a soft touch rubber material that makes it feel pretty grippy and resists fingerprints quite well. On the rear we have a Type-C port for charging, and then on the base it just says Strauss Wagner TW401. It has a slight ring on it, which is slightly reminiscent of the Samsung Galaxy Buds. But overall, we are talking about a very compact battery case design, as you can see here. Very small, up against something like, say, Apple's AirPods. You can see it is pretty similar. Here we have Xiaomi's Redmi AirDots, which is also pretty compact. And then finally, we have the Pamu Slide Minis, also are comparable in terms of the size. So opening up the lid, which is magnetic, it definitely looks more expensive than the price would suggest, with this ring that's accented and the S&W Strauss Wagner logo. For sure, it looks more distinctive than many of the other cheaper Shenzhen-based pairs we've seen from companies like, say, QCY or Soundpeats. But anyways, we can remove them very easily thanks to this oversized little slot here that makes them easy to pick up, and then they're magnetic, so they can pop in with a satisfying click to then begin charging. Taking a closer look at the buds themselves, we can see that they have a touch-sensitive area on the front, so it registers very gentle touches. I always like to see capacitive keys on these mini buds. It makes them more comfortable when you're wearing them to access the keys. And what's really good here is we have all the standard controls, including volume, which is a feature that many of these wireless buds often lack. So you can double tap and triple tap to turn the volume higher and lower, which is great to see. We can also do the standard things like playing and pausing your music, skip tracks, answer and reject phone calls. All of those gestures are supported. Otherwise, the body of these buds are made out of a soft touch rubber material, pretty snug and easy to pick up, in addition to resistant to fingerprints. Here are the Apple AirPods, which you can see are not too far off in terms of overall size. So again, we are talking about pretty compact buds, which is expected, considering that the battery life here isn't the longest, again around 3 to 4 hours. So we are talking about relatively small buds that are going to be comfortable for the entire listening duration, as opposed to something that packs a larger battery but also compromises on the size. Moving into audio quality and performance, the most impressive thing about the TW401s are definitely the lower frequency, such as the bass. As far as mini buds are concerned, they definitely pack a punch. The 6mm drivers are definitely punching above their weight. It feels very thumpy, especially if you're listening to a bass boosted track or any EDM type music. Anything with a drum beat really kind of rattles and punches, but at the same time doesn't distort the audio and doesn't really bleed over and make other elements of the music unenjoyable. It still is controlled relatively well. Works great for pop music, for electronic music. If you're watching any soundtrack or movie, it also sounds quite good. Same thing can be said about mids. It sounds very good, especially for most vocals that you're listening to. Trebles is also very clean, although it sometimes loses out a little bit on details if you're being extremely picky. Because we just recently reviewed the BGVP Q2 or Quantum 2, if you recall, those TWS buds have Nolus dual drivers, which are more hi-fi grade, and those had an emphasis on treble clarity. So it's a huge contrast with the Strauss Wagner being more bass focused, and so the difference between the two is very profound. One thing to point out though is, despite the fact that the battery case's back here resembles the Galaxy Buds, it does not have Qi wireless charging built on in. which some of the other pairs we've seen have adopted as well. So you can't pop this onto a charging mat. You have to rely on the Type-C port, but it still is perfectly acceptable, I'd say. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Strauss & Wagner TW401 buds. Overall, its forte would be in the bass, in addition to packing volume controls and a clean design that makes them look more expensive than the price would suggest. Compared to many of the other brands, I think they spent more time in terms of designing the aesthetics on here. It reminds me almost a little bit of Bang & Olufsen. I still wouldn't say they're necessarily audiophile grade, but it definitely sounds very roomy, above average sound for sure for the price, even though in terms of the technical specs, it might not be the most exciting thing in the world. You can check out more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Strauss & Wagner TW401.